And David Bender is our technology wizard, except
Yes.
today when we couldn't deal with it. Well, never mind.
Well, and live streaming is working today. It's working. We're good.
Oh, okay. All right.
So,
Very good.
yeah.
Excellent.
Barbara Morrison Rodriguez. Barbara is here, waving her hand probably. No, she's reading something and she has her microphone off. So, but she is here. I see her. And then is Betty Anthony here?
Betty may pop in a little bit later.
Okay. Well, we always want the money lady here because she's the one that ultimately sees the money goes out the door. So
I'm her proxy today.
oh, okay.
For the time being.
You are dual personality. Okay, very good, Duggan. Thank you. So let's just do a little self-introduction so that we know what each of our roles are. I mean, backgrounds, I guess, is what I'm really saying. So, Reverend Watkins, would you like to begin? You have sort of a different role today. You're more of a connector with the two committees.
I am. I'm Ayakia Watkins. I am listening today. My background is very varied. I came to Pinellas County in 1981, spent 14 years at Honeywell, came home, had a baby, got into social service. So I've been in social service, particularly public health and that kind of thing for the last 25 years. I'm senior pastor of the Kingdom Bible Christian Church here in Largo, Florida.
Okay. And she also is, she is an evaluating member on the A group, and she is the connecting person on the B group. So thank you, Ayako. And I just got a text from Carrie saying she's on the phone. So she's on with us somewhere. Brittany, what did you say?
Hi, Cherie. It's Barbara. I can't hear anything.
We can hear you just fine. We can hear you through the computer just fine.
I had the volume turned down. Sorry.
It's okay. Thank goodness our cell phones are still working. That's the good news.
Yeah.
I saw what you're calling. We can hear you just fine.
Okay.
Can we have an area code?
Dr.
Carrie?
Good,
Oh, for Carrie?
The area code.
I think if she presses *6, it'll unmute her.
We're in a
Okay.
webinar mode, so we can only, she's not on as a panelist, so I need to unmute her.
Okay. So what do you want me to do? Send her?
Just the area code.
Oh, okay. I will do that. And then she can manage the muting?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, no problem.
Hey, look, I was watching the county commission meeting today, and they had a bunch of technology problems, and they have a full-time technician there for the whole meeting. So it makes me feel a lot better that we just have these little glitches instead of great big ones. So let's not worry about it. All right. Let's see, who else do we want? Alithia, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us about your background.
Stanfield. I'm a member of the Pinellas Community Foundation Board. Have been retired soon to be 10 years as an assistant county administrator for Pinellas County government.
Okay. Alithia, I'm having a little trouble hearing you. Is anybody else? I can hear everyone else. But just give it a little volume or something, or move up closer to the microphone if you can.
All righty, is that okay?
Okay, Erin.
Hi, I'm Erin Baird. I'm the Director of Grants at Allegheny Franciscan Ministries. I've been there 20 years, so a long time. I don't know what else I want to say. I served as grants manager for many years, and really more of a program officer and working with our statewide initiatives and focused program that we have with our sponsoring organization, the Franciscan Sisters of Allegheny.
So you've seen a lot of grants come through your door, haven't you? Lisa?
Hi, I'm Lisa Carrillo. I'm with Pinellas County Human Services. I work in the planning and contracts section. I do grant management. I've been with the county for almost a year now, but my previous career experience was at the sheriff's office. I was there for 18 years in a couple different civilian capacities. Overall, I've got about 10 years of state and federal grant management experience. So I'm looking forward to being on the reviewer side instead of the writing and management side. It's kind of neat to see that dynamic of it.
Thank you, Lisa. Jomar? Yeah, how do you say your name? Jomar? Yomar?
Yeah, Jomar.
Jomar, okay.
Yeah.
Tell us about you.
So I currently work as the Senior Strategic Researcher over at the Juvenile Welfare Board. I'm a recent employee there. I started approximately 6 months ago, so just before we were all told to go home thanks to coronavirus. So pretty new to the organization, but a lot of my work experience does deal with public health, dealing in program management, in particular, working with grants and compliance of grants and other requirements. So that's a little bit about me.
Okay, thank you. What's your background? Education or whatever?
Yeah, so I currently have a master's of public health from Johns Hopkins University, and my undergrad was in psychology and biochemistry.
And you came to the Juvenile Welfare Board right from the university, from your master's?
Well, from Moffitt Cancer Center.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Good
so I
for
worked
you.
at Moffitt thank you. So I worked at Moffitt for about 4 years, working under a partnership grant, a U54, and then found this opportunity through the Juvenile Welfare Board, and I'm very happy here.
Thank you. Glad to have you. All right. Stepping right up here, we've got Carl, of course. Carl Lavender.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Carl Lavender, and I'm the Chief Equity Officer with the Foundation for a Healthy St. Petersburg. Been in this position now about 90 days. Been on staff about 2 years, and I was hired to be the Chief Investment Officer. And as we advance deeper into race equity, I've been given the charge to make sure that we do everything as best we possibly can. As I shared on the B call, I'm one of those Obi-Wan Kenobis. I've been around about 45 years in this space and about 15 years on the philanthropy side, in that I served as a board member at Allegheny and other foundations. And so I'm very familiar with this process and how we determine how grants are distributed. And very, very glad to be here. And my very dear friend, Sally, always good to work with you.
Nice to see you, Carl. And actually, Carl, just so you know, is also on the A committee. So he's kind of the crossover person. He and Ayako are crossover people for the two committees between committee A and B. All right, I think oh no, Carrie has arrived. Hi, Carrie.
Hi, Sally. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, good. I was very happy when I was told to unmute my phone.
Okay. So tell us about you and your experience.
Hello, everyone. I'm very honored to be on this committee with all of you. I'm a resident of Tarpon Springs. I moved down from my home in D.C. to be a full-time Tarpon resident about 10 years ago. Before that, I spent about 30 years as an engineering consultant for the Navy, and I worked on many proposal evaluation committees with that. When I moved here, I joined the local Rotary Club, and for the last 10 years, I've been working on grant work at the club and at the district level, writing and executing grants. I have a professional development company up in Tarpon Springs, and I have a PhD in engineering. And that's it. And I'm really happy to be here.
And Carrie and I sat on grants reviews committees for the district for Rotary several years ago, and we were both champions we are both champions of Rotary. So let me introduce the staff. So Cherie, will you start, and we'll be sure that everybody gets self-introduced here.
Thank you, Sally. I am Cherie Wright-Jones, and I am serving as a Senior Program Officer for Pinellas Cares Nonprofit Partnership Fund. And I have been on board for just a few months, but absolutely enjoying the work and enjoying working again with wonderful grant partners and making a difference in Pinellas County.
Great. And Cherie is kind of your point person if you have a question or something that needs to be either answered or resolved. Cherie is probably the person that you want to talk to. All right, so Brittany, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Brittany Baldwin. I'm the program associate with the CARES Fund. I am your, of course, deliverer of emails and all of the information you could possibly ever need. Hopefully, as we continue each week, that will be less and less. You'll be getting the same, updates and things like that, so we can kind of get into a groove. But I appreciate you guys. I'm your technical point person. If you need anything, if you need any references with GLM, or if you have any questions along the way, reach out to me definitely, and I will get you guys responses back as quickly as possible. So
Brittany, will we have the same Zoom number and password each time?
Yes. So
Okay.
you guys probably received a Zoom link with a ton, like every single week. You guys only have to do your assigned week for Committee B. So follow the Outlook calendar requests. And then of course, every meeting, I'll send you guys another link just in case.
Okay, that's probably a good idea.
Yes. For sure.
We'll look
Absolutely.
forward to your emails. Dr. Barbara Morrison Rodriguez, would you like
Hello,
to introduce
everyone.
yourself, please?
Yes, thank you. I'm Dr. Barbara Morrison Rodriguez. Hi, Erin. I have been a consultant after spending some time as an associate dean at USF at the Florida Mental Health Institute. And I'm saying hello to Erin because I haven't seen her for forever. And my very first consulting contract as a freelancer was with Allegheny Franciscan Foundation, and Erin was there at that particular time. So my role in this initiative is I'm the evaluation consultant, and my role is to really help the grantees make sure that their portion of the application around measurement and projection of performance, that whole sort of accountability piece, the evaluation piece is in place.
Great. Thank you, Barbara. And let's see, we have Duggan, of course. So Duggan.
Sure. So good afternoon, everybody. I think I know most of you on the call today and a couple new faces. I'm the CEO of the Pinellas Community Foundation, and I've been doing nonprofit work for quite a long time now. This has been an interesting and fun project for us. And just want to let everybody know, not only do we have Dr. Barbara Morrison Rodriguez helping us on the evaluation side of things, we are utilizing a great firm, Carr, Riggs and Ingram. They're helping us with the fiscal assessment side of things, making sure that there's another set of eyes on budget narrative and things like that. We're all in compliance with the CARES Act and the federal requirements. And I take a look at all those as well as that portion of the project. So I'm here to help with that. And so thankful that you all have given your time not only to review the grants during the week, but to commit yourself to being here to talk and do great things on behalf of our community. So thank you.
Thanks, Duggan. And not to leave out David Bender.
Oh, hello, I'm David Bender. I'm the Director of Grants and Projects here at PCF. On this, I usually oversee kind of all the grant processes. On this one, I'm more the back end. So I take what Cherie and Brittany need, what Dr. Morrison Rodriguez needs, I stick it together and build it out. So that's really my role here, and is the backup tech person.
And it's the most important one, David.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Back end doesn't sound good, but it does sound good because we know what you mean. It does. And it really is important to have all of these elements going. So thank you, David, for that. Have I given everyone a chance to speak? I hope so.
Except for you, Sally. You got to talk about yourself. What about you?
Oh yeah. Well, I'm retired. I just sit around and read trashy books and eat bonbons. So, life is good. But I come to a meeting every week at 1:00 on Thursday. No, I'm a former county commissioner. I was a lobbyist for the college. I started the Arts Council. I have a very eclectic background. When I lived in Japan and I talked to my students, they thought I couldn't hold a job because I'd had so many different jobs. But it's because I get bored after 5 or 6 years. So I just move on. And I certainly have moved on in my life. So lots of different things going on. And I am really honored to be what I call, not the chairman of this group, but the lead dog. So I'm only the lead dog in that you're going to be running beside me, and we're going to be running fast because we got a lot to cover here, a lot of things, a lot of moving parts taking place. So just expect you're going to be one of the running dogs along with me. I want to just mention 3 or 4 things, some of which have been kind of casually mentioned already, but I'll let it get expanded upon by others too. And that is, this is a public meeting. So you should know that we are transparent. We want to be transparent. Anybody that has worked under the Sunshine Law, which I know a number of you have, know that you want the world to know what you do and how you do it. And so people can get recordings of the meeting and so on. So it's all good. But Brittany, I think you could actually read the public statement. Can you do that?
I'm happy to. This is a public meeting and it is being recorded, as Ms. Sally said. The organizations whose applications are being reviewed may be asked to participate in the meeting by providing comments when asked a question by the Pinellas Cares Nonprofit Partnership Fund Grant Committee. If attending the Zoom meeting by computer or other smart device, you will be unmuted to respond back to any given question to the Grants Committee in the Zoom app, and you will have 3 minutes to respond with your question. If attending the Zoom meeting by phone only, you will be unmuted when it's your turn to speak, and you will need to press *6 on your phone to unmute yourself and, of course, respond accordingly. If you are representing an organization whose application is being reviewed today, please enter your name and the organization in the chat function of Zoom. So we will be able to recognize who you are if questions are asked from the committee. And also please note that the committee members and staff participating in this meeting have all signed conflict of interest forms. So if you need any further information about that, of course, reach out. And at the conclusion of your comments, you'll be muted again. I should have said that before as we go through the meeting. For those of you viewing this meeting through the YouTube live stream or recording, and you would like to provide feedback for the grant process, or if you have questions, of course, submit your comments and questions to caresfeedback@pinellas.sf.org, and we will respond to your comments and questions as soon as possible. But none of this feedback or questions will be answered live. And that's what I have to say. That's
Okay.
our public statement. So thank you.
Thank you. And Brittany, just for clarification and confidence, everybody has signed the conflict of interest form?
Yes, ma'am. That includes PCF staff as well as all the committee members who are participating today.
Okay, thank you very much. So we just want to be sure that you've reviewed it and understood it. And if you have questions or concern, I'll probably talk to Cherie about it. But I think that all of you have been through enough experiences here that you don't have questions about it.
And Sally, I just wanted to add one comment to follow up on that as well. So no conflicts are known as of today, but for the committee members to understand that if a conflict arises in the future, we need to know that as quickly as possible. And it will also prevent a member from serving on the committee going forward. It's not just the meeting for which there is a conflict, but you could no longer serve on the committee. So we know that some committee members are on boards, and the boards of those organizations aren't eligible for funding today the way it's designed, and so there's no conflict. But if for some reason the funding gets expanded and then that organization may want to apply, we'd need you to let us know. But then for the duration of this grant, you cannot participate on the committee. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that.
So the conflict of interest is always a sticky wicket because Duggan, I think it's also very important to understand that it really asks if there are any direct benefits to you through the organization that is applying. Is that right?
Yes, and in this case, if you have some controlling interest in an entity as well, that would be applying. And so that would cover board members as well.
Okay. All right. That's a good thing to know. So again, thank you all for serving on this committee. And I'll tell you my experience, and probably Alithia and others of you that have been doling out grants over the years have known that you have a lot of people will know very quickly that you're on this committee. So be aware that you may be getting contacted, lobbied, if you will, advocating their support and what have you. I would, or maybe even asking questions, which is probably the more likely thing to happen. And I would recommend to all of you that you refer them to the staff, Cherie specifically, to say, look, I want you to be sure to get the correct information. I don't want to mislead you in any way. And so it's better to talk to Cherie and give them the foundation phone number. And Cherie is your point person for that kind of thing. You know already that the committee meetings will be held every 2 weeks from 1 to 3 p.m. on Thursdays. And that we have Carl and Ioka will be 2 sets of reviewers crossing over back and forth between the 2 committees. Let's see. Oh, we'll try to stick to the 2-hour time limit. We should be able to do that today, but we're going to start getting loaded up on these. This is light duty today. So let's be sure that we have plenty of time to do it, but do it efficiently also. I'm suggesting something, but you can go from there if you don't like it. And that is that when we're reviewing the requests and the recommendations, that we look at kind of the middle 2 that may have not gotten, and this may not be so true this time, but it might be in future times, that we might have a middle 2, or maybe even those that are at the bottom that are the ones that we need to spend time discussing. And because those are probably the ones that are going to have the outstanding questions, or that we'll be glad to have their staff, the applicant staff, to be able to answer questions that we need. So let's spend our time doing that. If they look like a slam dunk, and maybe none of them will do that, but mostly we've found that you've got maybe there's top 2 or 3 that really just kind of rise to the top, but then others that we're struggling with. One of the things that Duggan referred to, which I have to tell you honestly, especially in this group of grants, I spent way too much time looking over the financial pieces to it. And I had heartburn with some of them, as my remarks included. And Duggan and Cherie have assured me that they are getting scrutiny by a lot of other people, including accounting firm, the Carr Rigby Ingram Group, as well as the county. And so we probably should not get too much angst over that subject. We really have 2 or 3 things that we should, well, actually 3 things that we should be looking at. First of all, does their application fit the mission of the organization? Or are they just kind of creating something for the sake of money being available, and that's not really a part of their basic mission? Does it meet a community need? And finally, can they deliver on the request and really be able to do it so that we're confident that they can do it? So those are the 3 main things that we need to be looking at. I think there will be questions that we might have along the way about finance, but Duggan and Cherie, others may be here to answer that question. So we don't need to maybe spend as much time digging into that as I thought we would. I had 2 that I just kept looking at it, coming back to it. 2 days later, I'm looking at it again, like, I just have to figure this out. And I was really glad when I had a chance to talk to staff about that. So thank you. We're going to, you know, to be honest with you, we're all trying to get to say yes. We've got a lot of money here, and we want to be sure that it's getting well spent, obviously. And so, you know, the yes is going to be the best part of this. It's not going to be the no's. And so we want to be sure that we incorporate our comments that are meaningful, but we want them to be sure that they can deliver on them, and that we can give them funding, and hopefully not partial funding. All of us have sat on grants committees, I'm sure, where you give partial funding just because you don't have enough money. We're fortunate that we have a generous amount of money from through the CARES Act funding from the county. And so if we can possibly make it happen, we should make it happen. Any questions about that? I'll bet you all had some of the same questions that I did about funding, because that was when you start looking at forms and budgets and 990s and audits and so on, you can really get your head wrapped around it, and not keeping focused on what the mission of the organization is, and can they deliver the service, and is it meeting a community need? So,
Sally?
Yes.
This is Carrie. Is someone else looking at the planned expenditures to ensure that how they're planning on spending the money is in line with what the CARES grant allows, or is that on us?
You can't see it, but they're shaking their heads yes. So Duggan or Cherie, either one of you might want to speak to that.
Yes, so on these, we're looking at all of that, the budget narrative very clearly, and have a number of eyes on that, and some great experts on that as well. This last week and this week, in the sake of trying to move applications forward and get funding moving forward, we put through applications that still needed some edits to those pieces. The goal is going forward that you will see them after they've already been turned back for fiscal issues or turned back for evaluation issues, and return to us with those issues fixed. So you're seeing the final application in its final form, but there are a few today that we still have some issues that need to be taken care of, but they will be handled. If you approve them, those issues will be handled prior to issuing a contract. And the contract attaches as part of that the approved budget narrative.
And along with that, Carrie, throughout the process, the grantees will be actually submitting a monthly report to include robust information about their financials, which will also be reviewed as well. So there are ongoing checks and balances regarding expenditures and that sort of thing, and that will be done on a monthly basis.
So in the future, when it gets to us, we don't have to scrutinize that. That's already been cleared.
I would say that you don't have to worry as much about if something is allowable or not allowable, but if you look at the budget picture and have heartburn about things or don't think it's appropriate related to the program that appears in the narrative, I would raise those issues, but not to worry so much as to allowable, not allowable under the CARES Act. But because we'll have taken care of those issues very clearly beforehand. But please look at it in the context of the program to make sure that the budget is appropriate, in your opinion, to support the program that's designed in the narrative.
So those notes could be put in the evaluation piece of it. You'll look at it, even though it may get fixed, or at least it's an issue that you've got raised for you, the staff. Okay. Any other questions? Well, unless we have anything else going on, I think we can get started. So maybe we should start kind of the last shall go first and look at golden generation. Since we just have 5 this time, maybe we can look at that one. As you know, they're looking at funding to provide food delivery services to the elderly by employing at-risk children and at-risk youth, not young children, that are aging out of the foster system. Anybody have any comments on it? They're asking for almost $150,000. Looks like Carl's jumping out of his seat. So Carl, did you want to say something?
No, the model appeared to be well thought out. I like the idea of how they're using these foster young people in this way. And so, I mean, I'll wait for the discussion, Madam Chair, and weigh in at that point. But yes, I'll wait.
Okay. Questions, comments? I would say personally that I really like the connectivity of the two age groups, and that seemed to me to be a win-win. I was if I'm recalling this correctly, and I couldn't get back to my evaluation grant specifically, but I was a little concerned about their lack of telling us all the entities that they're connecting with. I mean, there's so many, like Neighborly Senior Services and Area Agency on Aging and a number of other organizations that they could connect with, and they didn't mention those, but as I recall. But still, I think the concept is so good, and I'd love to see them deliver on it. And I have talked to people about Golden Generations, and they have a good reputation. I have not picked up anything negative about them. So I'm just sharing what I know.
I had similar concerns about their LOPs as well, that I'm trying to do the same thing you did, Sally, trying to read this little chart here.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They were talking about, expansion in Kenner City and Leldman, but I didn't see any collaboration in those areas. And one of the things that I had put about the budget issue was they wanted to purchase some items that we perhaps need to look at, and I'm sure staff will, whether it was cheaper to rent some of those items versus outright purchase.
Okay. Any other comments?
I like the concept.
Right. Okay.
I'm having trouble hearing Mrs. Stanfield. I don't
Yes,
know if
I am
anyone
too.
else. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me see what's going on here.
Okay.
You sound like you're in, I hate to say this,
chamber.
in Xi'an in a cave.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway.
It may be a
question on some of the applications where I got confused about the number served, and they're breaking out by month reporting. If those are unique people, like the first number, if that's all new 200 or not new, or 200 served, and then
right,
each month. So is that initial number under number of Pinellas County residents served? That's the total served by the project. Is that what the question's asking?
That's one of the questions. Cherie, you're saying yes?
Estimated reach by month, so it's just like for September 50, and those are cumulative through the rest of the year.
Yes, you are correct. I'll allow Dr. Barbara Morrison Rodriguez, our independent evaluator, to answer that question, but Aaron, you are correct.
Yeah. Aaron,
so
I think
the question always
we asked for a projection for the length of the project, but we also asked monthly what that would be. I think the biggest challenge I'm finding of people is the issue of duplicated versus unduplicated as far as the food things are concerned. It's very hard in a feeding program, I think, unless you have a set number of people whose homes you visit and provide a meal to. If it's a food pantry or a drive-through, you're going to get duplicated counts. And I think that we really should not make people crazy trying to figure out the duplicate versus the duplicate. Let's have a policy. Either you count unduplicated or duplicated and make it easy for them because they're struggling with it. And that's a lot of the question that I get. I just think in food programs, it's hard to untangle it. You have a family that'll show up, every week out of a month. So from an evaluation point of view, it's what's the unit of analysis? Is it the meal? Is it the family? Is it the food bag? What is it? What are they going to count? Whatever that is, it needs to be consistently applied. I think that's the main thing.
Yes, excellent observation. And if you look at the 3 categories that are requirements to receive these funding, this project addresses both food systems and behavioral health, in that the service of the foster children in some ways does make them feel better about themselves and their circumstance. So Dr. Rodriguez, would you say that this is 2 out of 3 of the buckets? And the third bucket, of course, wouldn't even fit in this profile.
Well, it is, they applied under food, but as you say, there is definitely a psychological benefit for these young people to be of service, and a psychological benefit for the people who are getting the meal. So very often one intervention has multiple advantages to it, but it's clear that in this case, they applied under the food category, and that is the way that I looked at their application.
Dr. Morrison Rodriguez, do you have any additional comments regarding their evaluation of this particular one?
No, I had no problems with this one.
Thank you.
I thought, but just let me just say for the record, I find most of the food ones pretty straightforward. Okay. And so where we get mired down is in the behavioral ones, and that's where the complexities come in, and that's where I've been spending most of my time.
Akio, you're muted. I can't hear you.
I was just agreeing with what Dr. Morrison Rodriguez is. Anytime the food ones are going to be easier than the behavioral health, because it gets down into a level of detail.
Right.
But the food ones are going to be easier.
Mm-hmm.
And I did, I'm listening on this one, Carl. But I really love the concept of the intergenerational.
I do too.
I really love that concept, particularly using the kids that's in the foster care or aging out of the foster care. Because many of them have not had that advantage of an older parent or grandparent in their lives.
So what is the sentiment of the group about duplicated or unduplicated? Any thoughts?
Well, we have told organizations, at least on the food side, it doesn't matter as much. I think when we get into behavioral health and then also looking at the legal aid for eviction mitigation, it's going to be easier to define. An individual or a family is not coming back. They may have multiple legal visits, but there will be one effort to prevent an eviction. And in the food, it's difficult, and in some cases, I will say it's also difficult to ascertain, because we also have organizations that are doing mass food distribution and are simply counting the number of people that are coming. We don't want them to stop people and get their names and information. It just simply is not able to be done. And so we have sort of collectively agreed, and then also with our partners in human services, that in food, we're less concerned about it. And food related proposals, we're less concerned. We just want to document mostly that people are served and where they're coming from to the best extent we can.
Right. I think the one thing, Sally, is however you decide to do that, duplicated or unduplicated, is that you use that consistently throughout. Where we get into trouble is where they count it one way and then the next month it shifts. If you're going to do unduplicated counts, then say that's what you're going to do and be consistent in your measurements and your monthly reporting all the way through.
I guess the question
grantee level.
But maybe the question gets raised is it different with a food bank or with a food pantry than it is with a mental health service? I don't know. I mean, I would guess that, I deliver food to a food pantry every week, and the people that work there tell me they see the same people coming back every week because they need the food, obviously. Mm-hmm. So, they are there every week because that's their groceries for the week.
Right, exactly.
So we understand that. I don't know whether that's so true in mental health. And
it might be. If you have a crisis outreach group, for example, and someone is there for support every week, they may show up every week. I think it depends on what the nature And the way that I've looked at it is, what is the nature of the intervention? Your measurements have to make sense for what it is that you say you are doing. And once you make that decision, then you stick to it for the consistency of measurement. So these are some of the conversations I'm having with the behavioral health programs.
And you're the measurement lady, so you're going to tell us how to do that. Help.
I'll do my best. It's sometimes it's very clear, sometimes it's not quite so clear. So we'll see.
Understood.
Yeah.
Understood.
So, yes, my only other comment is that we have crises in food deserts as a result of COVID-19, which is one of the reasons why the county set aside these dollars. This program is in a food desert.
Yeah.
This program has been aggravated, if you will, in their capacity because of COVID-19. And so the support for any of our, I think, our food service requests in food deserts need to be handled, I think, in the highest and best way. So again, Madam Chair, I'm in support of the project.
Okay. I would be happy to take a motion that we accept Golden Generations request for $149,558, unless you have further questions. There's probably someone on the line from Golden Generations if you had further questions. If not, I'd be happy to have a motion.
I'll make a motion, Sally, to approve this one.
Okay, I'm sorry, who is that? Carrie?
This is Carrie, I apologize.
Okay, thank you.
Olympia seconds.
Okay, discussion, questions? All in favor, raise your hand. Thank you. Anyone opposed? You just should scream if you're opposed or something, but apparently you're not, so we'll go with it. You know, it might be easy to go back to the gathering of women only because it sort of has some of the same elements to it, and it is a food program, and we'll talk about the Meals on Wheels kids for kids too. But let's go back to the gathering of women. So I said we were going to start with the bottom two or the middle two, and now I'm just all over the map. But you know, we've only got 5 this time, so it's pretty easy. So any comments about the gathering of women? Got high marks. That I probably all of you had the same kind of concern. They've been around for a while, but they just created the food pantry in 2020 in May. And it's like, oh my gosh, can they deliver on this? You know, if they haven't had that much experience. But I've asked about them, and again, they seem like a really solid organization. So that's all I know. I'm just setting that up for your discussion because I'm not the lone voice in this for sure. Any comments? Questions?
Sally, this is just an observation. I think with the food crisis that the whole county is in right now, we may see many applications from people who have not been in the food distribution service before, who just out of concern and good citizenship want to step up and help. I think we're going to see more of those.
I think you're so right, Dr. Barbara. I was at my doctor. I actually was having a telehealth call with my doctor, and he was asking me what I was doing, and I told him about this, and he said, oh my gosh, I was just walking by a church the other day. I've never seen a group in line like they have. This was in Dunedin. I mean, this is not exactly the poorest section of the community, but he was stunned at seeing, he said there were about 50 people in line waiting for food. Right. So you're right. I mean, I think we will see that kind of snapshot of the world in September of 2020 and probably for the rest of 2020 at least.
As the holidays pick up, we all know in this business, the demand for pantry space and for food support increases. The unemployment numbers are still going up. These spaces become more and more important. I understand the due diligence of this, Madam Chair, and that we want to hold people accountable, but I agree with Dr. Morrison in that this number is going to go up. I'd like to hear from our MPH on the team here. Jomar, what's your research in this piece? If you're finding out that these pantries are satisfying crises, or what's the background there on your point of view?
Yeah, so, especially during a natural disaster such as this, there is evidently a need for food pantries and for food services to be delivered to those most at risk. Therefore, seniors and those with underlying conditions. But when I was reviewing this application, though it was well-intentioned, I will admit that I had difficulty kind of understanding how well this would be executed. To me, their communication strategy seems a little vague. Not only was their communication strategy a little vague, but their preparedness plan was also a bit vague. And so I'm concerned, especially as we roll into September and October, those being some of the months with highest hurricanes approaching the state of Florida. What is their ability to continue operations, continue programming, and reaching these at-risk individuals who are first at risk because of COVID-19, but then they're subsequently at additional risk because now they're trapped in their homes because of a hurricane or a natural disaster. And so I was a little, unfortunately, with this application, it appeared that a lot of the content was too vague for me to really kind of be persuaded into funding it.
Okay, well, let's
did
see if
you
there's
rate
any
it
other comment.
poorly? May I ask, did you rate it poorly?
I rated it a 75, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so I think it's very well intentioned. I do like the idea of delivering foods to individuals, but I was just concerned about the implementation portion. Do they have enough foundation to implement this, especially since they've recently started this endeavor?
Jomar, would it be helpful if we unmuted the lead for this project and allow them to answer that question directly for you in 3 minutes? Would that be helpful to the team?
Yeah.
David, could you support us and unmute the lead for Gathering of Women? I do believe it is
Grace is unmuted. Yeah.
Perfect. Grace Ann, could you please respond to this question? You've got 3 minutes.
Sure, Jamar. The Gathering of Women has been around for a while, but the food pantry is new and the delivery service is new. Is my understanding that Samantha, who's the CEO, she has arranged with several faith-based programs throughout South St. Pete to make sure that the delivery of this food will be a continual process. They have been delivering food for the past couple of months, and that's been successful. And this is really just an expansion of the work that they're already doing in South St. Pete.
Thank you.
May I ask a question, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Are they coordinating with any of the senior organizations that are delivering meals, like Meals on Wheels and the Area Agency on Aging's program?
So I do believe that in the list of LPOs that they are coordinating with Golden Generations. And I'm pulling up the list of LPOs right now so I can answer that question for you.
I didn't see it. That's why the question came to mind.
And that's a good point. And I think that once this organization does have the capacity to deliver more food, that they will be looking out to other organizations that are providing similar services to see how they can partner and work together.
Thank you.
So I think we're going to rely on staff to give it pretty good scrutiny as the monthly reports come in.
Absolutely.
Sure.
And we can also ask Alithia, to your point, we can also ask Gathering of Women to go ahead and provide some information, additional information about the LPO, so ensure that information currently is captured to the best of their ability.
And that probably would give some comfort to Jomar too, since that is a concern, to be sure that it gets out there.
Absolutely. We will absolutely have that information updated.
All right. Any other questions of Grace Ann while we have her on the phone? If not, let's move on action. The request is for $63,958. Is there a motion to approve that request?
Move for approval.
Thank you. That was Carl.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And is there a second?
Second.
Aaron, thank you.
Mhm.
Is there any further discussion? All in the favor say, raise your hand. Thank you. Any opposition? I didn't see your hand raised, Jomar.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes. So kind of sorry.
You probably said yes and your microphone was off. Okay, looks like it's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And Cherie, to Jomar and Alethea's comments, could we attach some obligation here to tweak some of the deliverables to ensure that their questions are answered going forward? Is that fair to ask?
Sure, we can absolutely ensure that information is included, how they will address those organizations.
Cherie.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If you don't mind, since we're still talking about food, how about if we just go on to the Tampa Bay Network to End Hunger for the Meals on Wheels for Kids. Recommendation, amount requested, I mean, is $550,000. Questions about this one? All of us are kind of getting back with our notes and all of that kind of thing. So let me do the same thing.
Sally, this is Barbara. Would it be helpful to let us know what the average, I believe when the scoring is done, there is an average among the scores. I think it might be helpful for us to know how these applications have been scored.
I think we've got that easily, Barbara.
Okay.
And this one is averaged an 82%.
Right. Thank you. I don't have them right in front of me. That's why I was asking.
No problem. Okay.
Do I sound better?
Yes, a little. Yes, you do.
I'll have to have Terry look at that.
You know what it is? If you look, when you turn your head, it mutes your voice. You sound better when you look straight ahead.
Okay.
That's true. Mm-hmm.
The numbers were big on this one, but you know, we talked about duplicated versus unduplicated, so perhaps some of them will be duplicated, but I just thought that these were some big numbers.
It's a lot of kids.
Particularly in reference to the summary that they gave in the narrative about, you know, children that did not have access to food and how many they had served in the past. And I really would like to see, you know, some true collaborations with the schools on the programs that they're providing and the pickups and stuff. It's a worthy proposal, but it did raise some questions about numbers and collaboration for me.
And no LPOs and so on. Yes, I would agree with that. We'll maybe talk to a staff person. I hope we've got a staff person handy for that one. Cherie?
So unfortunately, we do not have a staff person handy for that one. Unfortunately, she had a last minute emergency that needed to be dealt with. Regarding the LPO information, I am happy to follow up to get a more robust understanding of that. This is one that staff did have quite a bit of conversation with Alethea regarding partners and who else was working on the project, particularly its connection with the school system to ensure that we were not duplicating efforts. And we have been assured that with this particular project, there are no duplication of efforts. They have gone through a pretty lengthy process to ensure they have isolated those children that are not able to get fed, oftentimes on school property, but they actually bring meals on that children who are doing e-learning can actually take home. So that's where the bulk of this funding comes from. Does that help answer your question, Alethea?
Yes. I also had a question about what community locations they're using. They reference.
We didn't understand you, Alethea. Say it again.
I also have a question about what community locations are they using, because they reference site coordinator, people coming to these community locations. Since they didn't put any LPOs, I don't know where the community locations are.
Sure. I can absolutely get that information for you, the LPOs along with the community locations. I know they were looking at locations with the highest need, mostly in the Littleman community.
And they did just announce, it was in the paper the other day, they announced a new relationship, I believe, with RCS in downtown Clearwater, the RCS Food Bank, as a new site where things are also going to be packed and use that as a distribution hub as well. And I think they're also looking to do this as an expansion. So I think they're still in the process of really nailing down exactly where that's going to happen. This program popped up as a result of COVID. And as a way to address things starting in the springtime and into the summer, as a result of COVID, making sure that the needs of kids were addressed. And it got some significant funding from a number of partners to sort of get started, and carry it through. But now they're looking to pick it up and expand it through the end of the year. The Juvenile Welfare Board was one of those partners that did step up and provide some funding to support, I think, at least the purchases of food. Thinking that this was a good idea. And I think JWB has their eyes on this one too.
Yep.
I'm a little bit familiar with it. I know it's taken off. I think it started in St. Pete. It's moved to Waimama. And now you mentioned Clearwater. And I know Daystar was one of their LPOs at the beginning.
Right.
I'm assuming they still are. And I was informed the money was for food. Instead of staffing, so it's going directly to food.
This one has some staffing costs associated with it, and this is one where we have asked for a more detailed explanation within their budget to ensure that the way that they have allocated things was allowed under this particular set of funding, and they have provided a much more now substantial explanation, because they had included things in here about the executive director salary, which that always gives us pause, because the idea of these grants is not to fund existing positions. But now the explanation has come forward that in this case, they have closed out a variety of projects specifically for the idea of utilizing their staff to expand this program. And I think the timing has worked out right, but in our additional fiscal review of this and the things that they have sent back as justification and explanation, it sounded reasonable for taking on the expansion of this program. But I think where there's maybe some confusion is in this LPO concept, these logistical partner organizations. We set that up as an opportunity for smaller organizations or other entities to connect with one entity as part of a project. Part of it was a way to get those entities compensated in a partnership. And so I think there are partnerships that exist without compensation, so they might not necessarily be considered an LPO by our definition. And so where there's some confusion is some organizations will put in just their partners in the LPO section. Others will explain that the partnership is deeper than that and involves agreements and compensation for services under the larger agreement. And in this case, I think even if they're not compensated prior to contracting, we need a very clear list of where they're doing this, to Alithia's point.
Mm-hmm. So maybe in our instructions somewhere, we can emphasize that LPOs are partners, some of which may be compensated and some may not, just to make that clear. And then I think people would be more likely to list them.
And then we don't need to revise anything on the application other than to update the description within that section.
Yeah,
that's correct.
I just
Thank
simply
you.
compensated or uncompensated. That'll take care of it.
Yes, I like that.
Okay.
Well, even further than that, though, in some cases, haven't they listed some funders that they called LPOs, that they were just funders? They were not partners in the sense that we were looking for partners.
Right.
I thought that was confusing to me. I've already talked to Duggan about this, and so I just wasn't. It seemed to me that there are two or three different kinds of partners that you have, and it would be helpful to have that sorted out.
Yeah, we were hoping that the word, Sally, we were hoping that the word logistical would convey that
Right.
we're talking about people on the ground who are helping you with implementation.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But I mean, that doesn't mean everybody reads it appropriately, but that was our intent in wording it that way.
Right. Lisa, did you have a comment?
I do. I just wanted to, let me find my notes real quick. I'm sorry. Oh, this particular application cited that they had other pending applications, grant applications. So I wasn't sure if, I don't think it went into great detail on what they were for. So obviously if it's for the same type of expansion, that would be something that we would have to look for. So I don't know if, I think there's one other application that was submitted that had something similar as well. So I don't know if we can like ask them to go into greater detail on what those grant applications are for, if it's something to pair with this program, or if they're applying for basically the same thing from 3 different funders in the hopes of getting something. We just got to make sure if more than one funds them that we're not funding the same effort.
And in some cases, this is a moving target. And I think a lot of organizations didn't anticipate this volume of funding being available at this time of the year. So they did what they needed to do to submit. To the extent that it's private funding and it's able to be done, a few of them in advance we've worked on that they have shifted that private funding to the future after this particular funding runs out, so that we can get a 5-month bump from this particular funding and then sustaining of a program starting in January 1 of 2021, where that's allowed with private or other funding. But to Lisa's point, that's a good idea. The other thing that they have to do as part of the contracting certification is explain how it's not duplicating payment from other funding sources for the same stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we understand your concern, Lisa, and I think it's really, really important for us to be clear that it's not supplanting any of these funds.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? We don't have a staff person, but I think Cherie was able to answer the questions for us adequately. I think the Tampa Bay Network to End Hunger has a good reputation. I mean, I think that's one of the things that is heartening to me, at least, that, you know, they're going to be able to do this work. And I kind of like the concept. I think I'm not just kind of liked, I think it's very necessary and wonderful that we can get food to kids in sort of a creative way. So I'm just anxious to see it get pinned down a little bit more so that we have some confidence on this. But given that we would count on the staff to answer these outstanding questions, Cherie, I'm wondering if we cannot move forward on this. I really am reluctant to delay them if we don't have just an explosion of heartburn, because again, we have dollars available and people that need food. So that's the bottom line. And an organization that has the mission and the heart for the mission, I think.
I have a comment, and in looking at the LPOs, this may help, and this may be a futuristic kind of thinking, particularly as we see these requests with these amounts coming in. I'd like to see organizations collaborate with smaller nonprofits in the future in an effort to help build capacity in a smaller organization, whereas a smaller organization may not have been able to write for this, but could help, could assist in some way. And that's too late for them, but just in the future, just in terms of thinking, how can I help a smaller organization? How can I help build capacity in a smaller organization that in the future they might be able to apply on their own? Just a thought.
Sure. Ayaki, I can assure you that has been done through our informational webinars, and we talk, especially with our larger organizations, we've spoken with them at length about that. We've also reminded them that we have a feedback mechanism. So if you're using those LPOs, we're going to reach out to them and we're going to ensure that their needs have also been met, that they had maybe not equal portion of funding, but an equitable portion of funding, so to really be able to respond back to the needs that they're finding in their community. I can tell you with the Network to End Hunger, most of the organizations that they do work with are very small grassroots mom and pop, either organizations and or churches that are oftentimes not as sophisticated. I think it would be helpful, and I can assure you that staff will work behind the scenes to get you all an updated list of the LPOs and the community locations. I think that would help you, along with asking to give a little bit of explanation around who it is they're partnering with and how it is they're utilizing them. I think one of the things that the Network to End Hunger recognizes is that it is those smaller organizations who is really able to get out into the community, places where folks can walk that might be around the corner when they don't have access to transportation to carry 2 or 3 bags of groceries. They can walk to this smaller location, get what they need, and then walk back home. But I assure you that I can definitely get that. And as much as we can continue to say that and remind them of folks, that includes you all as an amazing committee to remind organizations that that's critical and that's imperative, and to help them think around building the capacity. We as staff are doing that, but it's always helpful if through these calls that we're having, remind future applicants of that as well, and that they hear it directly from you all, how important that is. We're thinking about ensuring the needs of our community is met, as well as building the capacity of our smaller organizations. So thank you for sharing that and highlighting that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Following the thread here, Madam Chair, we don't have doubt, we just have questions. So could conceivably we move for approval and have the questions answered by team? Or is there doubt that this for this application and then put them back into the queue?
I will cite my personal opinion, and that is I would rather go ahead and take the action and have these outstanding questions answered satisfactorily for the staff. Bring it back to us just as this is the information that you were looking for. Again, because I would like to see us support those organizations as in a timely way. But that's my opinion. That may not be everyone's opinion. So please feel free to say something. Erin, you look like you might have something to say on this topic.
No, I just agree. I support the staff following up and getting those questions and reporting back to us. I'm comfortable with that.
Okay. Does that mean that you're going to make a motion to approve $550,000 with the outstanding questions to be answered before the money goes out the door?
Yes. So I make a motion to approve the grant to Tampa Bay Network to End Hunger for $550,000 with the staff following up and answering questions and getting back to us.
Thank you, Erin.
Is there a second? Or you asked that?
Yeah. Is there a second?
Alethea, second.
Alethea, thank you. The 2 E's on the committee. Is there any further discussion or outstanding questions that you want the staff to bring forward? We had the same thing happen last week too, where there was outstanding questions that got answered. So it's helpful to have staff kind of clean up after the elephants. We're the elephants that have the questions. So thank you, staff. All in favor of the motion, say aye. I'm sorry. Hand raised, please. Okay, thank you. Is there any opposition? I'm not seeing your hand, Carrie, so I assume that you're raising your hand, or you will verbally.
Yes, and I'll unmute if I have to object. Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, let's move on to placement works, behavioral health.
Sally, if I might, I would like to suggest at this point that maybe Duggan and Cherie and I set a little bit of context for these 2 grant applications.
I think that would be great.
Yeah, because one of the things when we started out thinking about behavioral health, I think our thoughts were that all of the grants, or certainly the vast majority, would be coming in for the provision of clinical services, crisis management, intervention, crisis behavioral, and so on. And what has happened here is that we have now 2 requests, which have more to do with staffing, safety, infrastructure. Do those things matter to the well-being of the participants, the clients, the residents of these programs? They certainly do, but they are not requests for the most part for direct clinical services. So we had developed that whole part of the application with asking for clinical measures and change in mental or behavioral status which really do not fit these particular applications. So Duggan and Cherie and I and the team have had some conversations about this. And one of the things that it has done is it has caused us to build out another component of the application to address requests like this, which are not directly clinical interventions, but are more safety, quality, assurance of regulatory standards and that kind of thing. It's not a surprise that they're tending to come from the more residential type programs. Okay, so these are people who are living in a specific place because of mental illness or some kind of disability, and the quality of their surroundings, whether it be from staffing or because of COVID infections, are being negatively impacted. And so these requests are coming through to build those quality standards back up, either through preservation or enhancement of staffing or infrastructure or safety or cleaning or things like that. So the one question I had from Duggan is, are these even allowable grants under this category? So Duggan, maybe you might want to speak to that.
So I had some conversation with the county and the human services staff about this because I think we all agreed when we began this process, we were thinking the requests would come in as clinical requests. Let's take BOLI first. What they're asking for is related to a residential program, but it is clearly a behavioral health program. The bulk of the programming has some behavioral health connection. And so in talking to the county about it, if the program, even residential, is primarily serving or a major portion of the program is related to behavioral health services, then we're going to be okay, even if we're talking about trying to deal with infrastructure issues, cleanliness, staff turnover, staff maintenance, but the program at the heart has to have significant connection to behavioral health, mental health. And so in this case, they were fine with the BOLI proposal. And so we have gone through, they have a little bit different metrics than you would traditionally see in this proposal, because it's not about clinical, but we all agree. And when I talk to the county staff, we all agree. If you have a major decline in staff in a program like the BOLI programs, because people are sick, it is a significant disruption and is detrimental to the clients. Right. And so in that philosophy, we agree that the way that they have proposed this is fine and would be allowable. And we all want to be very clear that this has to, at its heart, have this behavioral health, mental health component. We are not now opening up to homeless programs, residential programs who refer out for mental health services. It really has to be at the heart and soul of the program. Mm-hmm. So in the BOLI sense, the county's fine with the way this has been written, and so are we.
Right. And the other thing that I've been doing, and so we now have BOLI, and the same thing applies to some extent for placement works. In my consultations with them, what I have told them to do is they need to make a very clear statement about how the deficits they're experiencing are impacting the behavioral health and emotional well-being of their residents, because it is a connection. So, but if you sort of start, okay, if you don't have proper staffing and people are not getting personal attention, they're not getting socialization, they're sick because the place is not clean, there is no question that directly impacts. But I think they should not assume that everybody knows that. They should make a statement that said, we are wanting these things because it is a quality of care issue which directly impacts the behavioral and mental well-being of our residents. So that statement should be made. However, the kinds of metrics that they put together in their evaluation are not going to be directly clinical measures. It's going to be a restoration of staffing. It's going to be bringing on enhancements that ensure safety and quality and things like that. So those were the kinds of things that had to be written. So that's one thing. The other thing that we have done, because of the complexity of the behavioral health interventions, and as you can imagine, with the field as broad as that, we're getting all kinds of requests that are coming in for different kinds of services, for different kinds of populations. And people who write in for behavioral health grants, for example, for the federal government, have found it to their advantage to list as many clinical things as they can possibly think of as measures. All right. So one of the things that I have said to them in this intervention is we are trying to keep this simple. In addition to which, we have a very simple, straightforward reporting system, which simply cannot handle the capacity of 50 clinical measures for every participant. So what I've asked them to do, and here's the other qualification, which is an issue. Those of you in behavioral health know this is a very short window for behavioral health interventions. Okay, some of the things we measure, they take a baseline and you don't repeat them for 6 months or a year, let alone on a monthly basis. So the time compression of this whole initiative is very much a challenge for people in the behavioral health domain. So what I have said to them is on the clinical side, among the clinical measures that are used, you are thinking about using, you should select the ones that are most valid and most reliable for short-term assessments. You have got to report on some degree of clinical improvement on a month-by-month basis. Therefore, they have to be sensitive enough to pick up clinical indicators in that short time window. So that's carved down to a much smaller pool. And what I've asked them to do, because we want them to account for clients improving or at least stabilizing, but I've asked them to pick the one most robust metric they can present that meets all of those qualifiers. It means something on a monthly basis. It has clinical validity. It's appropriate for the population that you're serving. So as you go forward, what you will see in the behavioral health applications, you will see when they're asked for measurement and the projection of increase in performance and stability, it will be based on one measure. So I don't want you to think that they got lazy all of a sudden and decided they didn't. In fact, I've gotten significant pushback from them because they want to mention all of the entire clinical battery that they use. I tell them I respect them for it. I appreciate it. I know they're brilliant clinicians. Never had they have experience where a funder has asked them for less rather than more. Okay, so that's the exchange that we've been going through. So you will see, and they will have to justify the selection of that measure. Given their population and given what they're working on, what is their rationale for picking this one measure out of a possible series of many? So I just wanted to give you that framework. So as you're reading these in the future, that will not seem strange to you. And to know that that request to narrow down has come from us.
Okay, Barbara, that measure would be the same for all of their clients? It wouldn't be by client.
No, it's not by client. Many of them, even if they have individual service, for example, let's say that they're doing something, trying to work on people from being socially isolated. So example, there are social engagement scales that they may want to use. They could be using a group methodology. They might be doing individual counseling and outreach. They may be doing peer-to-peer kind of networks. But what I've asked them to do is to pick the one measure that is most broadly applicable for the result that they want to see for the people that they are serving. And that was some of them have different strategies for different subpopulations. I said, you have to pick one. For the purposes of this, in terms of accountability, you have to pick one. Now, that doesn't mean that they have to limit their practice or their measurement. There's a difference between what they measure and what we're asking them to report. They could have 30 measures as far as I'm concerned, but we are asking them for the sake of this project to pick one that they feel is most robust and most valid.
Thank you, Barbara. And thank you, Duggan and Cherie, for, that context is important because it is sort of a different animal than what we've been dealing with.
It is. And I think we're going to get a lot more of these. Once the word gets out that this kind of thing is being approved, we're going to see a lot more of these.
Right.
My only concern is that they tend to be high ticket in terms of the request. And I worry that they could crowd out, maybe some of the smaller applications. That is a concern that I have.
Okay. Well, we're still looking at placement work, so let's talk about that one.
Okay.
Which is a request for $187,790.
Yeah.
So let me just look back here.
A lot of this, I think, had to do with safety in this, in terms of PPE.
Correct.
And one of the other things that they're starting to also look at is what the COVID infection rates are, because these are residential programs, and part of their rationale for needing some of these enhancements, particularly around cleanliness and staffing, was to try to keep those COVID infection rates down. But I don't know if they selected that. At the stage at which I had this, I had conversations with them, and I sent them back to the drawing board. And I hope that the applications you reviewed, and Sherry, you could confirm this, are the ones that have the resubmitted outcomes in them. Are those the ones that everybody saw?
Not with this particular group. They do not have the updated evaluation piece, because we were trying to move them through just to get them to committee today. But yes, they have updated and they have finalized their outcomes and their metrics based upon your suggestions that you have approved.
Okay. The reason I was concerned is because I didn't see them, and I thought maybe I just didn't get them, that the review committee got them. So
we can reach out to Placement Works and ask them to resend that to you.
Yeah. Okay. I think the only assurance I can give the committee is that I've worked very, very hard with them on trying to narrow this down and to have it be precise in their minds, and also in the way that they convey it to us. And I think we had final agreement on what those should actually look like. It's just that they were not in the copies that you saw.
Someone made an interesting comment in their comments, which I did not pick up on, but I certainly agree with that. This does not seem to, the mental health services does not seem to be their mission, their overall mission. And so I was, I understand that it was sort of a struggle to make sure that it was accomplishing. Well, they do different things than mental health services, but they're needed right now. And so I guess what you're saying, Barbara, is that will be others like this that will.
There will be. And Sally, the other thing is behavioral health by design is somewhat more of a broader term than mental health services.
Right.
People have behavior disorders for many reasons: drug, alcohol. It could be a complement of a brain injury. It could be because of other physical disabilities. So if people think, if they're using the definition of mental health very, very narrowly defined, I think that that's going to be a challenge for us. I think that the nomenclature was specifically changed from mental health and mental illness to behavioral health to encompass this sort of broader umbrella that captures the things which impact people negatively from a functioning point of view. Is really what that emphasis is.
Very good point. That's really good to remember.
Sally, for the sake of clarity, can we all make sure, are we talking about Placement Works right now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And it applies to BOLI too, but we are talking about placement.
And we do have a Placement Works representative on the line. Perhaps it'd be helpful if we unmute them and ask them yours or the specific question from one of the reviewers regarding behavioral health and how it fits into the context of what they are doing. If we could, please, David, can you assist me and unmute Christy first? And then from there, if Grace Ann has any additional comments. And Christy is the CEO of Placement.
Both are allowed to talk.
Thank you. Christy, you have 3 minutes to respond, please.
I show Christy is being muted.
I clicked yes to unmute. I can't force unmute.
Grace Ann, in the meantime, can you begin responding until Christy is able to access her line?
Sure. So I just wanted to speak to the measurements that are going to be used, and I did work with with Dr. Morrison Rodriguez on this. We highlighted in our application the Beck Depression Inventory, which measures characteristics and attitudes of symptoms of depression. We also, the CEO is a licensed mental health counselor and is going to be the overall leader and supervisor of the entire expansion of this behavioral health program. We also use the symptom checklist 90R, which measures 9 scores along some different dimensions of global distress and other different issues that some of the folks that are served at Placement Works are dealing with. And then we've also created a Likert scale. So there's 3 different types of measurements that are going to be used in sync with each other. Placement Works serves 300 persons with disabilities, and they are focused on getting the people that they serve embedded into the employment community, but that very much means that any kind of mental health issues or behavioral health issues have to be addressed. And so the CEO is a licensed mental health counselor and sort of uses techniques in her counseling practice along with the management of the employment services. And what we found is over the past couple of months with the COVID pandemic is that there's been a significant increase in behavioral health issues because of anxiety, because of fear, because of unemployment, because a lot of the businesses have had to lay off some of their staff, and that meant the persons with disabilities sort of went first. And so there's all these different contributing factors to the reason why the Placement Works needs to make this program available to the clients that they serve.
Grace, this is Barbara. Let me just remind you though, because you mentioned 3 measurements. You mentioned 2 specific scales and then also a Likert type scale. For this purpose, I want 1 measure from you. Now, if you can come up with a way to validly consolidate those, perhaps as a platform for some kind of Likert scale, that would be fine. But you have to decide on 1 specific or global measure that you're actually going to report on to us.
Okay.
You can collect as much as you want. I'm just talking about reporting.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
And if you wanna run it by me one more time, I'm happy to take another look.
Okay, that sounds good. I think that, you know, these different scales are going to be used when they're appropriate for each client, but that the Likert scale is going to be used for everybody.
And that, I think my recommendation for you was to go with the Likert scale, as I recall.
Okay.
If it wasn't for you, it was for somebody else that's doing a Likert scale. They're all over my mind right now.
Any other questions or concerns that we can direct to, I'm sorry, is it Christy that we're talking to? I apologize, I didn't catch your name.
Yes, Christy is the CEO of the organization, Placement Works.
Thank you. Right.
Christy, have you been able to unmute your line? I don't think so. It sounds like
Grace that you were talking.
That was Grace Ann. You were
That was great. Okay, thank you.
It sounds like Grace Ann has answered the question sufficiently, committee. If not, if you have additional questions, we can ask her, but rest assured that prior to this going to contract, there will be some additional conversation between Placement Works and Dr. Barbara Morrison Rodriguez, who will ultimately finalize and sign off on their evaluation before it goes to contract. So you do have our assurance, staff's assurance, and of course, Dr. Morrison Rodriguez's assurance that their evaluation piece will be tweaked and will be updated.
Thank you.
And I'll also say, Sally, from our perspective, I still have unresolved fiscal issues. And this is one where we have our fiscal team is set to reach out directly and get some clarity on this. It appears that all of the requests related to staff are more or less for existing positions.
Right.
And the challenge is that this funding, by the way that the county commission approved their resolution for the usage of this funding, is for the expansion of a program. And the way that we're interpreting that is that it needs to, you can't just support existing staff. So either they had to be at risk of furlough but for this funding, or were gone but for this funding. And so we still have some questions that need to be resolved from a fiscal angle, especially when you have an executive director. We're looking for the compensation of an executive director in this case. I understand that there's the licensed mental health counseling angle to that, but an organization should prepare to compensate its executive director if that's indeed what it does. And just because the position requirements may have changed doesn't necessarily mean that this funding can be used to cover that position. So whether the committee, if the committee approves it, we still have questions that need to be resolved from that particular angle. And I have not gotten them resolved satisfactorily. So I've put our fiscal people on that to call and really get into the detail of that. It's not that it's bad or something wrong is happening here. It's that I just don't have the assurance yet that it meets the requirements. And so if you approve it, that's fine, but just know that this one still has that issue there too.
David, the client, the provider's on the call. Can we, yes, thank you. They need to get off the call at this point. We have some discussion. They're still on the call, people.
And I'm fine to have them answer that on the call too. I still am just not understanding how an organization has income coming in, has an executive director, and is applying for this funding to be used for that position plus existing staff.
David, can you please unmute the lines so that Grace Ann can answer that question, please?
They're unmuted. They're unmuted.
Gotcha.
Grace Ann or Christy?
So this is Grace. So let me explain to you the way that the Placement Works business model works. So the Florida Department of Vocational Rehabilitation refers clients with disabilities to Placement Works to evaluate them and to get them to the point where they can interview for jobs, and then they go out and then they have interviews, and then they hopefully get placed in a job. And that whole process has a dollar value attached to it. But since COVID has started, there have been very few referrals from the Department of Education, Division of Vocational Rehabilitation Services. And there's no date on when they're going to start referring again, because the Department of Education does not want their vocational counselors to have face-to-face visits with any of the client referrals. So the only way that Placement Works can continue to serve the clients that it already has placed in jobs and continuing to try and place additional clients who have been unemployed and are looking for jobs is to look at different ways of bringing in income while also having to support the behavioral health issues that have come up because of COVID. So the way that the referral system used to work and their fee-for-service model is dead in the water. This is a way for Placement Works to continue to serve the people that need the support, and then also keep the staff, or actually some of the staff is an expansion of staff, and some of them will be changing their roles. This is the way for them to continue serving these 300 clients with disabilities. And this is a way to keep the organization, viable and sustained while we move through this pandemic. So I think that we updated the budget and said, that there are some positions that will be eliminated at Placement Works if we do not receive grant money to continue forward with this service. So that's sort of like an update of what's going on in the climate of the fee-for-service nonprofit organizations where their referral systems have stopped because of COVID.
Okay, thank you, Grace. I'm going to tell you honestly, I have some heartburn with that, but that may be me. So let's hear from others. Any questions that you want to? Yes, please.
So the 300 clients that you are currently serving, you are not receiving any funding?
Exactly. Unless they're new clients, there's no new funding coming in.
Were you, okay, and in your old model, did they continue to make some payments for these 300?
There's a certain amount of money that's paid out for each individual, and if they've reached that cap, then there's no money that comes from that individual. But when you work with the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, you basically are saying you'll continue to support that person ongoing even after the fees have been paid out.
That's part of the contract?
It's part of the system and how it works.
But that's not contractual.
Well, I mean, it's if you take on a client through vocational rehabilitation, you're working on an agreement with them. So you're supposed to, the organizations that do employment for persons with disabilities through vocational rehabilitation have a good faith commitment to continue serving that client even after they've been placed in their job, and then whatever happens to them after that, they're still supposed to get support.
But with no financial support from DVR.
Exactly. It's a systemic problem with serving people with disabilities.
So what had you done in the past?
In the past, the fee-for-service model worked, and new clients would come in, and then old clients would be served within the same mix of those new clients. And Placement Works is very good at finding the right job for each person's skill. So there's not a lot of repeat customers in that way. So it hasn't been an issue for them until now, when the referrals have slowed down to the point where they're just trickling in now and not in the same way that they were before.
Aaron, go ahead.
I was just going to say, as clear as you just made that is exactly how it needs to read in the narrative. And we have a revised budget narrative that still says there really is no funding related to these positions, but I think it still just didn't jive with the fact that it's understood to be a fee-for-service program. And so as crystal clear as that was just made is how it needs to be made in the budget narrative. But I think we also need to understand, should that model resume, and perhaps is not going to by December 30th, because a lot of services and companies and others aren't even doing anything in person until January or March. As crystal clear as that was just made as to how basically the fee-for-service model has collapsed, needs to be explained that succinctly in the budget narrative so that we can justify providing services under this funding source for the clients.
Thank you.
Understood. Understood. And something else that might be important to know is that vocational rehabilitation pays out based on performance. So when different benchmarks are reached, that's when the payment happens. And so none of that is happening right now. Will it continue to happen after December? Yes, that's what we're all hoping. But right now, it's not happening.
Erin, did you have a question?
Yeah, my question was just about how long is the relationship as long as that person's employed, or is it for a year, or is it, how long is that?
It's for their lifetime, Erin.
Okay. So it's the same 300 people.
Well, I mean, some people move on or whatever, but yeah, it's 300 people right now. That's what's on the client rolls at Placement Works.
Okay.
Olivia,
Madam Chair, move for discussion.
Yes.
Move for discussion, please, so that we can move toward the vote. We're going to do this one. This is
Okay. Well, let's get a motion on the floor. What is the sentiment of the committee? You could postpone the decision. You can make a motion and with the second and have some caveats that would go with it related to finance and clarity of the program and what they intend to accomplish. What's the sentiment of the group?
My sentiment is move for approval with extensive review by staff attached to their first report to the evaluator.
Okay, is there,
I'd like to amend the motion. I'd like to move approval of the request up to the $187,790, depending on staff's looking at the budget and clarifications of the staffing model. So I'm moving up to the requested amount rather than the requested amount. That's my amendment.
Carl, will you accept that as a replacement motion, or do you want to vote on
Yes,
the
ma'am.
amendment?
Nope, I accept it as a replacement. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so would you like to second the motion then that Alithia has made, and we won't even call it an amendment?
Yes, I second the motion. I second the motion. Yes, ma'am.
Great, thank you. Is there further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, raise your hand. I'm so sorry. I'm getting that. Is there any opposition? Okay, that's leaving a lot in the hands of staff, I know. Staff on both sides for placement works as well as our own staff. So we'll expect that we'll get some information back on that eventually, but we've done the up to 187,790,000. Okay, moving on to our last one and moving on toward 3 o'clock. So let's keep moving along here. So Bowley Centers was requesting 377,574. Barbara, you that was helpful to have that context that you gave us before too.
Right.
And
Duggan and I had a phone call with the team at Bowley, and I think we were able. It's not reflected yet in what you saw, but Duggan, I think you would agree that on that call we came up with what I think is some acceptable measure.
Yes, and as a matter of fact, this one got revised before it went to committee. So what you saw is the revised proposal.
Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Especially the metrics portion of the proposal was revised. Yes.
Right.
Okay. Were there questions? There was one person that had wouldn't fund this project. So I would be happy to hear the organization should not be reimbursed. And it got not a terribly low score, but I think there was just some concerns about it, which may have been addressed by the revision.
Yeah, Sally, that was mine. This is Carrie.
Okay.
And it was just that I had so many questions. I didn't feel comfortable with it. Yes, I wanted to hear the discussion before I made a final.
Right.
I thought that what they wanted to do was good. But the sort of questions I have, I'm understanding now that, the staff is looking at those sort of concerns, and it doesn't need to, I don't need to concern myself with it. So I can turn that around.
Okay.
And I guess the only real question I had was they were putting a benefits cost at 20% on the hazard pay, and I didn't see why they would do that, since it would only impact benefit costs of 3% for a 401k match. So that was a sort of that's really was one of my more question things in terms of if what they were asking for was reasonable. But the rest of it I thought was pretty good.
Okay.
And to Carrie's point, can we ask that question? I know the folks from Bowley are on the line. Can we ask about that calculation, and we'll also get it clarified in more detail in the budget narrative, what's included in that assessment on the hazard pay. I do know when you do offer hazard pay, it has got to be included as part of the employee's regular wages.
Yes.
And so I just want to make sure what exactly that additional piece assessed on top of that is that just your regular rate for fringe and taxes, or what exactly is it? And we'll also get you to document that in writing on a little bit revised budget narrative, please.
Okay, who do we have on the phone from Boley?
Kevin Marone with Boley, Chief Operating Officer is here. Yes, that formula is a standard based upon because this pay is part of their regular payroll tax. Then that calculation goes into their payroll. So we just applied it to that difference. But we're more than happy to clarify or elaborate that further on the application if that is helpful and preferred.
And,
Okay.
and it would be, please, and when we'll push the narrative back, if you just define those elements that get to that calculation, that would be helpful, please.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
Any
Kevin.
other questions of Kevin while we have him?
So I had a question. So I'm seeing here in the progress rate that the two measures specified are the staff turnover rate and the number of residents and staff who have tested positive for COVID. And I guess I'm not seeing the connection to how that is a behavioral health measure. So if you could clarify for me, that would be great.
Yeah.
Barbara's always probably.
Well, it takes us back to where I started. That it's not a clinical behavior measure. It's a safety measure which has clinical implications or behavioral implications. I think if we still continue to think narrowly about mental health in a narrow way with clinical measures for clinical interventions, these projects are going to continue to be a real challenge. I think for these, we have to look that these are about context, safety, staffing, capacity for interacting with the clients, all of which have effects on behavioral dimensions or mental outcomes. They're a step removed. They are a step removed, but necessary, if that helps.
Yeah, it does help. I guess the other point, since we're talking about the context of safety and sanitation and everything, I saw that there were several comments regarding the carpet and the request for carpet. And I guess from a safety perspective, why replace carpet and not opt for something that's a little more easy to clean, such as tile or linoleum or laminate? So clarity on that would be great.
Okay.
I'd be happy to reply to that. The facility in which we're looking to replace the carpet is a very large facility, and we've actually removed the carpet. This was a 100% carpet facility. And over the years, we've removed the carpet and replaced it with a more sanitary flooring with vinyl flooring. We have one section, which is a common area where the clients hang out, watch television, that is still carpet. And it is not a good environment with the current COVID situation. So this cost is actually to take the remaining part of the building and replace the carpet with a vinyl flooring that is more sanitary and easier to clean.
Good catch, Jomar.
Thank you.
But I can also, when the application is open back up, make sure that that piece is clear, that we're not replacing it with other carpet.
That would be good. Great. Okay, any other questions? Thank you, Kevin. Are we ready for a motion?
My only last question, Madam Chair, is for the evaluator. To what extent are you looking for evidence that the provider is including our priority areas, i.e. people of color and low income or communities of color?
That is in their statement of justification, their outreach, their target population. And so I'm assuming that everybody is looking for that across, not just at the evaluation. I am not measuring that, Carl.
Okay.
That comes in the justification for the project, the justification for the service delivery area, the outreach and engagement of very high risk populations. They're asked to list all of the types of at-risk populations that they're serving. So that may have implications for the evaluation, but in my mind, it's not strictly an evaluation.
Thank you.
I think we should all be, given the nature of this, we
Yeah.
need to all be on the lookout for that as we do reviews.
Absolutely. That's what I was going to say. That seems a responsibility of both the committee and the rest of the staff to make sure that we do have that.
Thank you.
Okay. Is anybody ready for a motion to go on the floor for approval of $377,574?
I move approval of the request of Bowley Centers.
And I'm sorry, is that Carrie?
This is
Olivia.
Olivia.
I'll second.
Okay. Is there discussion or questions? All in favor say aye. Raise your hand, raise your hand. Is there any opposition? Okay, excellent. We've done a lot of hard work today.
Excellent.
And I've kept you to the full 2 hours. I'm sorry, or almost. Thank you very much.
Sally, I'd like to note too that we and the team have had a discussion. We're going to try very, very hard now that we are understanding this process better to make sure that those evaluation issues, as soon as while they're looking at budgetary considerations, they're going to have me look at the evaluation at the same time. So hopefully there won't be that kind of lag where changes have been made and you haven't seen it. So we're working really hard to synchronize all of that.
Barbara, we fully appreciate this is an evolutionary process. So we'll stay with you.
Yeah.
We'll stay with you.
Duggan, with our decisions today, where are we at? We're about $2.7 million into our goal.
So let me look at what was today's total?
Today's total, if we end up awarding everything fully, would be $1,328,880.
And last week was 1.4, I think.
No,
Last week was
about
349,000.
Yeah, last week was
around
small.
there.
We're at 1.67, and then starting next week and the week after, there are some very significant proposals coming forward. One of them at 3 million, well, two of them I think at 3 million. We have one in the hopper at 5, and then a number of other proposals along the way as well. So now it's picking up.
So we're pacing. Okay, good. I just wanted for the chair, Madam Chair, I'm just asking that question as we pace this process. Our goal is to make sure these dollars are all gone by a certain date. So thank you very much for that, Doug. Thank you.
Well, can I ask a question about that? Do we go till they run out, or is there a deliberate strategy to try to stretch it out for people who are coming? I mean, is it when it's gone, it's gone?
It's when it's several things at one time, Barbara. So we're watching what the pace is of what's coming in. And we're now more comfortable that that's picked up. Because if it's not, then we need to have some conversation with the county, and they need to decide whether or not they want to broaden the parameters still under the CARES Act. But we have told organizations and been very clear, if you're going to apply, you need to apply and get the application in. Because the other piece is that we don't want to be starting a program or funding an expansion November 15th for it to shut down December 30th.
Absolutely.
And so we've been very clear about that as well. So now that we're seeing the numbers pick up, we still continue to monitor that. But now that we've seen the numbers pick up, we have more confidence. But we continue to monitor that, and we'll work with the county if an expansion is necessary.
Thank you, Duggan.
Thank you. And like I said, you're running with the dog. Stay with me. And thank you
Good job.
for all you've done. We're meeting again on September 17th at 1:00, and we'll be glad to have you all here. Thank you for all of you had something to offer, some piece to the puzzle that we're needing to put together every time. So thank you again for what you do and what you've done. Anything you want to say as a kind of an update, Duggan, or did Carl just do that for you?
I think Carl did just to briefly not take too much time, because we want to end hopefully before 3, to let everybody know the next processes are collecting some final information from the agencies or getting the final tweaks to their application. This goes to a contract phase. We get a contract issued for the services, get that signed. And if it's an organization that has the exec sign. We have an officer of the board sign as well. And if it's a board member, all volunteer run organization and a board member signs, that's sufficient. And then there will be a webinar about kind of an onboarding webinar about the grant. Then there's a fiscal webinar that needs to be attended as well. Doesn't mean that organizations can't begin providing the services or the expansion of the services, but we have some trainings that they need to go through as well. And then they pick up on their weekly and monthly reporting on their schedule. So those are the next pieces that go forward. Last week's contracts are almost finished. We had some revisions needed by those organizations for those who were there last week. That's almost finished, and we'll get some of these in process as well. And I think we're ready, almost ready for the applications to go for Committee A, get them out a little earlier than we did this week, so they can begin their review. But again, to everybody's point from staff, the goal is, now that we've gone through 2 of these sessions, that you'll see the final applications where we've already asked for the revisions to be completed. And now we're pretty strict about, if you haven't completed what we've asked for, we're not putting it to the committee. We, unless it's absolutely necessary for something that we learn at the committee process, we should not be having hiccups unless you find something going forward.
Excellent.
Okay, thank you, Doug. And Cherie, do you have anything you want to wind up with here?
No, I don't. I just want to say thank you for your patience, your flexibility as we continue to evolve to respond to the need. We are still trying to figure out our process. I am so gracious to the nonprofits who've also been patient as we try to figure this out and to refine our system. So thank you for joining us on this journey. Look forward to seeing you on September the 17th, and have a nice weekend and a long weekend.
Yeah, have a nice Labor Day weekend. I'm sorry, Sophia Loren keeps getting in the way here.
She wants some camera time.
She's very interested in this project, so just
Thank you.
This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.